Hey friends, making progress can be hard sometimes, right? Or more specifically, making progress can be easy. Making progress consistently over years and years without quitting or getting distracted, that can be hard. But it doesn't have to be. There are ways to make progress easier and more consistently and be more motivated throughout the process. And here's how. And the answer may be a little simpler and more intuitive than we think. So at some point in your life, you might have tried something that was fun and exciting at first. Maybe a fitness routine, a new sport with friends, or even just learning a new skill, like a new language. Over time, you may notice a trend. You look forward to this thing at first, like a game. You can't wait to get off work or school and start playing it again. And then the effect dies down a bit. You still like it, but not quite as much as you did when you first started. And then you're neutral about it. And eventually, if you work hard, you dread it. And it's not a big deal for things like video games or things we do for fun because we can just come back to it later. But it can be a pretty big problem for things like fitness and learning new languages because they require more consistency. And because they require consistency, you'll sometimes procrastinate. Even if you're an extraordinarily dedicated individual, sometimes you'll just feel like putting it off. And around this point, for things like fitness and work and learning, you might be told to push past that. Keep doing. Push through the desire to procrastinate and be lazy, and you can reap the reward that's on the other side of that. You may have heard motivational quotes like, boring is what wins, consistency really matters, or put in the work even when it feels hard. And this can be very valid advice. Consistency and hard work are where a lot of results happen. However, and I decided I'm going to move around for this video, I think of motivation and passion as extra fuel. If you take two equally disciplined individuals, the more passionate one is more likely to win because their work time and their playtime are going to go towards their goal. And more importantly, while procrastination can be an issue if left unchecked, of course, procrastination can also be a sign that we need to make a change. If we lack the motivation that we once had, it could be a sign from our mind and body that we need to do something different. And they're not always wrong. Maybe we're not as motivated because progress is coming slower than it should, and we feel that intuitively, even if we haven't recognized it up here. Maybe progress has stopped altogether, or maybe we're not even sure what progress we're making and we need a better way to measure. These are all things that can affect motivation. Thankfully, there's a pretty easy solution for all of this. Just take a break from whatever it is you're doing, maybe do something else for a few months, and then come back and you might be rejuvenated. But wait a second, you might think, whoa, Hampton, hang on. Hold your horses, Nelly. Wouldn't taking a break actually slow down our progress? And in fact, if we stop, we might actually go backwards in progress. And yes, in fitness, for example, this is a very valid concern. The reason many coaches advise trainees against changing their routines too often is because it makes progress harder to measure. Plus, in many fields, improvements often come from doing the same thing over and over again and making slight improvements over time. We tend to get diminishing returns as we get more advanced, but it's better than stopping. And again, this doesn't matter as much for things like hobbies, like playing guitar or cooking. And I like both of those things, but I don't do them for a living, and I'm not like super focused on improving, so I can take a break pretty much whenever I want and come back later. But for areas where we want or need to make consistent progress, like our job, our studies, our fitness and health, it can matter a lot. So instead of stopping our routine, we can make changes, strategic changes. Instead of pausing our routine, we can modulate it. So if you want a visualization, if your progress line is slowing down over time, you can pivot, and even though you're not going the exact same direction, you're still making faster progress over time. But how we change is super important. They need to be strategic changes. There are good ways and bad ways, or better ways and worse ways, and it depends on our goals. The first thing you might want to consider is if you should make a change at all, because you might not have to yet. The litmus test I use is, are you making progress? And are you happy with your current routine? This can apply to fitness, studying, or anything in which you're trying to make progress. Because if you are making progress and you like what you're doing, then I would just keep doing that until one of those two conditions change. This one's an easy one. Don't worry too much about what other people might say because your situation might be different. However, if progress slows down, or especially if it slows to a crawl, then you may want to consider changes. And even if that's not an issue, or you believe that doing what you're currently doing is the best way for you to get results, then you might want to ask yourself a follow-up question, which is, do you enjoy what you're currently doing? Is it the best way to spend your time and effort? And if not, then you may also want to consider changes. And I'll explain why those two conditions are important. The key is to make subtle, strategic routine changes in areas you want to improve anyway. So think about your current routine. What are you improving? What are you working on? And even if it's nothing, don't worry, that happens, you can start whenever. Next, consider what you think you should work on. We usually already have a few thoughts in the back of our minds. Maybe we know we want to lose or gain weight, but we haven't had the time yet. Or we've always wanted to learn a new language or an instrument. Most of us already have goals that we haven't pursued yet or haven't pursued to the degree that we want. We all have unfinished side quests, so to speak. And these unwalked paths, as I'll call them, if we leave them too long, they can fester into guilt, procrastination, and low self-esteem. Because we know we want to work on them and we just haven't, kind of like an unrealized dream. But if we go through life knowing that we'll make changes sometimes, then these paths actually become full of potential and give us even more room to blossom and grow. Think about working on a large jigsaw puzzle. After you start to connect a few pieces, you'll start noticing there are many different areas you can work on. It might seem pleasing to your mind if you say start left and work your way right, but it doesn't have to work out that way, and it usually doesn't. You can work on one spot of the puzzle, then after you get stuck or progress slows down, then you can work on other parts that you already know that you want to work on. You may not be making progress in the same area, but you're still making overall progress in areas you want or need to do anyway, if you want to finish the whole puzzle, right? So overall progress has not stopped or even slowed. And more importantly, you're making more progress, faster progress, than if you spent your effort and time trying to brute force the places where you were stuck. In fact, the new pieces you connect and the new areas you complete might help clarify or give context when you eventually go back to the places you were stuck. And of course, this is just a metaphor, but it really helped me when I started to see my life this way. And you can use the metaphor of a puzzle, or you can think of a house. After you lay the foundation, you can work on different rooms. Or you can think of a garden where you can cultivate different plants. But let's go to some real-world examples. And since we're a fitness channel, supposed to be a fitness channel, we can start with a fitness example. And it might seem familiar to you, because if you've ever worked out, then you most likely have applied this to your fitness at some point, even if unintentionally. The vast majority of people I know don't stick to the same workout routine for their entire lives. From people who rarely work out to professional athletes. For example, people who are less serious about fitness might try different workout trends. It may work for a little while, then they take a break, or they move on to something else. And if that's you, don't worry too much. Exercise isn't going anywhere, gravity isn't going anywhere. It'll be here when you want it, hopefully. And people who are serious about their fitness track their progress, like the weight they can lift or the muscle they've gained. And they actually make planned changes to their routine to keep progress consistent. This concept has been around for a long time, but is sometimes called periodization. So as you can see, we can benefit from adding changes to our routines, but we have to make the right ones for our goals. But in the context of this video, I'm talking about making changes if you already want to make them. Maybe your progress has slowed down or stopped, or you're sick and tired of doing the same thing and you want to try something else. And from that, you can see that even if there were no physical benefits, there are still psychological benefits. Again, it's a lot more fun when progress feels exciting. But there are physical benefits because you're practicing things that you want to practice anyway. And in any case, you can make strategic changes within your goals to keep progress moving. And the ideal changes will depend on the goals you have. Because say if you just want overall fitness, then you have much more freedom to explore different exercises. Let's say you're working on squats and you have some stalled progress. You could perhaps work on lunges. You're still working your legs and you're still building strength and muscle and mobility. So you won't lose much, if any, progress in your squats and you're just coloring a different part of the board. Again, this works for you if you want overall fitness or even overall strength. If you stay diligent and progressive on your lunges, you'll come back as strong or stronger with your squats. If you alternate between squats and lunges and do this around once or twice a year, then you can effectively double the number of exercises you're working on because you'd swap back and forth and wouldn't have to cram them all into the same training sessions. By the way, you can swap back and forth between 2 things, but you can add more if you want. You can swap between 3 or 4. But that's really only if you don't really care about specializing in any particular thing and you just want to explore. On the other hand, some people really want to focus on a specific exercise. Maybe you just want to really get your bench press numbers up. If you change to push-ups or weighted dips, that might work all right, but you want to bench press. Maybe you're competing, or maybe you just really like the exercise. I totally get it. I've been obsessed with certain exercises before, many times. In this case, you can keep the exercise, but change the sets and reps you do. If you've been focusing on a 6 to 9 rep range, you can try increasing the weight and going down to 3 to 5, or lowering the weight and exploring 15 to 20 reps. You can think of it as building strength, muscle, or endurance, but functionally, it's just exploring different rep and set ranges. But again, explore things that you want or need later. If your goal is strength, then building some muscle probably wouldn't hurt, and vice versa. But if you really don't want to change any of that, then you can just change things like the grip width. You can alternate between standard and narrow. I guess narrow bench press is more like this, depending on the person. I train a lot with isometrics, so for me, the change is easy. I just change the angle. And from here, we can see that progress never really stalls or stops because there's so many different dimensions to our progress, even if you reached your theoretical genetic limit on a muscle. Highly unlikely, by the way. You still work on your endurance, or muscle capacity, or mobility. And you can mix and match these. For example, if you want to change the lower reps and higher weight, you can still include some higher rep sets in your accessory work after you do your main sets. Hope this isn't too much detail. Some people dislike the following, but I recommend sometimes pursuing the changes that interest you. Yes, hard, productive work is not always fun. Sometimes we have to do things, even though they're hard. However, our work, the grind, doesn't have to be miserable all the time either. It's possible to enjoy what we're doing while we're working hard. Yes, consistency is very important. It's how we make and measure progress. We accomplish tremendous feats over small increments of improvement over time. However, if you have been consistently working on something for a while, you may naturally have a desire to explore. For fitness, maybe you want to challenge yourself on different exercises. Or if you primarily like strength and mobility, maybe you would like some bodybuilding at some point. By the way, muscle can be really useful even if you don't want to be a bodybuilder. I mentioned that earlier, but it's something I want to discuss more in my content. Like a lot of the things we do for muscle building is also increasing muscle capacity. So you're still building strength. You are building functionality and stability sometimes. And very notably, more control because you can hold or move the stuff longer. More times. The types of changes we make within our routine could be a whole video within itself. Let me know if you're at all interested. But what about some examples outside of fitness? After all, the title and concept was about how to make progress exciting again. How do I keep feeling excited and motivated about other things in life? Well, firstly, we may have to ask ourselves some questions and more clearly define our goals to understand what we want. And after we know what we want, or think we know what we want, then we can make a plan to better move in that direction. So let's say, for example, you always want to learn to play an instrument, like the guitar. You might want to ask yourself if you specifically like the guitar, or if you just want to play music. Because if you like overall music and you have ambitions to learn different things, then you could alternate between instruments, like bringing in the piano for a few weeks or months. However, if you specifically want to get better at the guitar and improve faster, which I kind of recommend, then you can just change the way you practice. After you build a foundation and you can play fairly competently, you'll realize there are many things you can explore. You can alternate between learning songs and developing fundamental skills, for example. To help you learn songs faster, you can brush up on chord theory. And if that ever gets tiring or boring, then you can work on fingerstyle playing. That applies to many of these things, by the way. The exploration usually comes after you build a solid foundation. Like when I mentioned building a house. Usually you want to get the foundation down first before you explore too much. It'll help you remember, understand, and use the skills that you develop later on. For things like language, you could learn multiple languages at the same time, but that might feel odd. You probably will feel more comfortable becoming proficient with one language first. And though learning one language can help you with other languages because there are many shared concepts. But you could focus on conversational skills for a while and then study idioms, or read related cultural books, or you can work on writing. A notable thing is that you can mix and match these. While watching this video, you might think, well, I don't want to alternate too much. I might forget what I've learned. You might want a more holistic day-to-day learning experience that covers everything with some frequency. And you can have that. You don't have to change everything. You can just change the focus if you want. Let's say you practice for an hour a day or 20 minutes a day, depending on how much time you have. You can spend 75% of that time focusing on your main thing and then 25% of the time on the other things you want to work on. So main time practicing conversation, other times grammar. Or vice versa. Practicing chords or practicing conversational skills. And then the remainder can go into learning a song you like or writing, or vice versa. By the way, I know a lot of you watching this are in school, and this can also apply to studying, homework, and essays and stuff. Because of the nature of school, you usually have to do multiple subjects at once. So you can't alternate too much. But within the context of a single study session or homework session, this is a place where planned breaks can really help. Before you start working, set a timer for 30 minutes, and when it goes off, walk around, stretch, and take a break. Set a timer for that too, like 5 minutes. And when it goes off, you can come back. That's what I did in college and it helped. Like hours sometimes. I don't even remember the subjects. There are many different potential fields that I'm talking about and covering right now. We're just talking about learning in general, progress in general, change in general. But some fields may have ideal ways to learn. And you don't have to mess up that formula. I'm not suggesting you go against everything you know to work. But if you're able to, you can tweak some of those variables to keep you more interested. And if that is keeping you learning and progressing in an enjoyable way at a good, consistent pace, then I'd say it's pretty close to ideal. So, as you can see, adding slight strategic changes to our routines can be super helpful when learning new things and developing new skills. I relate to the idea that after we get into a good groove and we're comfortable, we finally found a routine that we like, we may not want to change. I don't want to disrupt that. But after we're settled in for a while, we may naturally want to explore, and that's when we can consider adding changes. We're not wasting time if we're building things that we wanted to build at some point anyway. Understanding this changed how I see the world. Almost everything alternates to some degree, and it's this alternation that drives our progress. People can walk one foot and then the other foot, but we don't think about changing our steps. We're just walking forward. We wake, and then we sleep, and this keeps us growing and healthy. It doesn't have to be only two things either. Wheels turn and pistons move up and down. This powers engines and drives us forward. Seasons change, spring, summer, fall, winter, and this cycle sustains life on Earth. By recognizing and embracing this natural rhythm of life, we can simulate it to help us towards our goals and overcome challenges. Procrastination can be an issue. Not everything we like to do is fun, and it can sometimes stop us from doing the things that we know we need to do. However, sometimes it could be a sign that we want to make a change, or need to make a change, and this change can help us keep moving forward. I have a free fitness routine on the website, as well as a fitness book and a fitness app if you want to incorporate some of these philosophies into your training. Have a beautiful day.